this?
Welcome to the Killer Comic Show.
Welcome to the Killer Comic Show.
Miss that intro every Thursday. It's the same thing. It gets me. It's like we're in a nightclub.
I love it, mate.
This is different because normally for the first 3 weeks of the year it was me and Andy, and now you're back. Tom, welcome back, son.
I'm back, mate. I got sacked for 3 weeks. I wasn't allowed on. I got told I upset everyone. No, I'm like, I'm joking.
But it's been me and Andy have been busy. We've been like covering for you and stuff. We haven't been doing the Killer Keys because obviously you haven't been here and we don't know anything about that. But we've been doing our best.
You've been doing a great job, you guys. You've been keeping it alive, mate.
We've been trying. But I don't think the people are here to see us for some reason. We've got Dave Collects, we've got ABZ. You are back. We've got Leon Russell, GP Venom, Wakishi's Tea House. There's so many people in, but they're not here to see us. They're here to see what we've been doing the promo about. It's someone's second appearance on the show. So without further ado, let's just... Ram V, you're back again for your second appearance on the Killer Comic Show. How are you?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much for having me back.
It's always a pleasure. Like, I think the first time you was on last year, you literally just had a newborn baby.
Yes, and can you believe it has been a little over 8 months since then?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Has it become any less stressful?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the first few months, at least, we were a little bit. Are we doing things all right? Are things fine? I have no idea. And I think incessantly we just needed people to tell us, like, that's okay, that's expected, that's normal. And I think now we're at that point where we're like, oh yeah, babies are resilient creatures, and they will happily go through a lot, which is kind of reassuring on some level, I suppose.
That's good. I see the picture you posted on Facebook the other day where you're holding above it. It was the Lion King thing. It looked great. It's all part and parcel.
Well, he's actually on my shoulders. I'm not actually holding him like the Lion King thing. He's on my shoulders. I'm just very tall, so it looks like I'm holding him up.
Well, I only realised, me and Andy only realised how tall you was when we see you at Thought Bubble. And we were just posing for a picture, and I was like, I should probably try and get on my tiptoes for this because I'm a short ass. But it's fatherhood is great. I've got 3 kids, so 3 boys. So if you ever want to know what the different ages of stages they go through, more than you can take one for a couple of days.
Alex Packnadell has got a young son as well, and I keep turning to him for advice, and his advice is, nothing I tell you is going to be relevant 2 weeks from now. So just wing it and you'll be fine. Because every time you think you've figured out something, it's like the person changes on you. Yeah,
that's it. And that won't change until like at least they're 18 or 19. That's right. It. But how have you been? Like throughout everything, parenthood and stuff, you've been increasingly busy.
Yeah, just busy. And I know I was saying this last time I was on the show as well. Busy by reason of enthusiasm and not managing my workload well. So like not intentionally busy or busier than I intend to be, at least. But I'm winging it. It'll be fine. I need to catch up on some sleep, but that's all right.
That's a good place to be, though. with all
It
that
is.
being that busy.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I can complain, but you know, I'm finding things to complain about at that point. Yeah.
I'm the same.
So what we've got, like last time, it was we spoke about just, I think you was in the process of jumping onto Venom and stuff like that. So what we've done now, we've put together like a few slides where we kind of just highlight from the start of your career going through to where you are now, with exciting news that was announced.
Yeah, I
3 or
looked
4
at
weeks
the
ago.
little intro and I was like,
Yeah.
man, it feels like I've been around for a really long time. Just look at all these, but I haven't really.
It's what 2016 is. What is it?
Yeah,
5 or 6
yeah.
years ago now. So that's
Yeah.
kind of when you first burst onto the scene. So if we kind of, obviously the Killer Comic Show, we're presenting Ram V. Obviously, your work speaks for itself. And obviously, for people out there that don't kind of know much about you, did you just want to give like an overview to new viewers or people that have been sleeping under a rock while you've been around?
Yeah, I'm a writer. I originally was based out of Mumbai in India, and I moved over to UK to study creative writing, having been a chemical engineer for most of my life before then. 2016, I wrote a book called Black Mamba, which came at the kind of at the end of my creative writing course, and that was my first. It was a self-published book, and then from there, the year after, I did a book at Image. The year after that, I wrote my first DC story. The year after that, I wrote for Marvel, and you know, now I've written a plethora of creator-owned titles since then. Some of them have won Eisners with Blue and Green, and IGN's Best Graphic Novel of the Year, and all of that. So it's been a interesting, crazy journey, but yeah, I just hope to keep making more books.
Now,
And we want you to make more books.
Now, being a chemical engineer, that must have been like a whole lifestyle change from you thinking, right, I'm doing that and now I'm going to get into writing. Was that a choice that you always knew you wanted to do, or is it kind of something that you just fell into after doing?
I mean, on one level, I always knew I wanted to do it, because, and it didn't really feel like much of a lifestyle change. It just felt less stressful, to be honest, because I'd always wanted to write, and I'd been writing even before I quit chemical engineering, and that I'd written short stories, 3-4 page comics here and there. And some of them had been published. So there was this kind of thought in the back of my mind that, hey, you're actually good at this thing that you really love doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then end of 2012, I think just work and personal life stress got to a point where I was like, you know what, I need to change what I'm doing because I'm not happy. I don't want to be 60 looking back at this time and go, I wish I'd done that other thing. Mm-hmm. So you know, I dove in both feet. First couple of years were a bit rough, but I knew, fortunately, because I had pursued it as a hobby, I kind of knew that I had it in me, and with a little bit of work, I could be good.
That's wicked.
It is indeed, like just going from that and knowing that you want to pursue your goal and you want to get to where you got to get to. For me, obviously we've spoken about Black Mamba, but Graffiti's Wall was such a great story. Like, because obviously in London, and I assume in like Mumbai and stuff, graffiti is part and parcel of like the culture in London. You see graffiti and you think, oh, this is bad, but we've kind of made a thing about it. So you've got like the artist like Banksy, who has become famous off the back of this, off the back of graffiti and stuff like that. Was that always in the back of your mind going into Graffiti's Wall? Like, was there something like an essence of trying to push this to the forefront that it's not tacky in a certain way?
No, I mean, I think the perception of it being tacky or not is a cultural artifact, and so it depends where you come from. But the idea for Graffiti's Wall actually came from attending a talk by an artist called Tom Eaton, who I think is British but lives in America. I'm not sure, but Tom was a graffiti artist who started out, who, like a lot of other graffiti artists, started out kind of doing this underground, semi-illegal. If I get caught, they're probably going to put me in prison or fine me. kind of thing. And so there has always been this undercurrent of defiance and undercurrent of subversion to graffiti as an art form. And then he had gone on from there to become very successful, kind of renowned muralist who was hired by banks and hotels to do murals on the sides of their buildings, if you will. So it was an interesting transition in his talk from the roots of graffiti. Kind of, I suppose it became popular when people started doing that on the New York subway in post 1940s. And so that talk, while he was doing that, there was this thing in my head about how it's not so prevalent in Mumbai, but you do still see it in its own ways, play here and there, and it becomes a signifier of creativity in poverty almost. And that's kind of where graffiti's wall started from as an idea, and then it grew from there. So yeah, I mean, the links to graffiti art were at its inception.
Were you like literally jotting down notes whilst you were at the talk, or did it all come to you afterwards? You were like, right, I've got to go to a coffee shop. I've got to write all this down quickly before I forget.
I never take notes.
No, nice.
No, I get ideas and then I just kind of let them sit there. And if they're still there 6 months later, they're probably worth pursuing.
I like that.
So, yeah.
Because I think you said in the last one.
Most of the ideas I've had have been in my head for like a year or more before I actually start working on them.
That head must be like a massive like whiteboard of just ideas all over the place. I'm gonna have a crack at that.
I mean, even calling it a whiteboard is like insinuating levels of organization. That it's just a pool. It's a soup of stuff.
Soup of words and letters.
And then you go to it when the time is right and the moon is in the sky. You reach into those dark waters and you hope that when you pull your hands out, there will be something worth writing about.
I like that. It's almost like that. Is it Harry Potter where he takes the memory? It's like one of those pools. Just pull those out. I'll do this story this week.
Well, Ram, it seems to be working, so don't fix it if it's not broken.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no. I will absolutely not take any steps to become more organized than I am. So,
I mean, because last time we spoke, we was kind of in like we were still in the pandemic and stuff. So thankfully now things are starting to change. Have you been like visit? Because I know you like your coffee. You know, you like sitting in your coffee shops and stuff. Have you been venturing out more?
Yeah, I've kind of started going back to them. I did suffer through a period of just like, what the hell? I can't write. I'm not productive, and I still have to do 6 scripts in a month. So my brain's just like melting at that point. And then it's like, all right, I need to change my routine up. I'm getting too complacent. That's what it is. Woke up, went over to a coffee shop, different table, and boom. 8 pages done in 3 hours. I was like, oh, okay, that's not bad. I got some stuff done. So yeah, it's weird how the brain works, but yeah, I keep needing to do that to sort of keep the productivity up.
Yeah.
The thing I really miss though is being able to just sit in a coffee shop and not write.
Yeah, I guess because now you're kind of in that rut where it's like, right, if I go to a coffee shop, I've now got to kind of sit there and write. I can't just relax because that's the mentality now. I've got to reach into that pool of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, I've got a few things wrapping up. Swamp Thing will wrap up at my end, even though season 2 issue 1 is just coming out this month. But it will the writing work will wrap up at my end within the next couple of months, and that should give me some breathing space. And I've been smart enough, at least for the past 6 months, to go like, no, I'm not saying yes to anything new. Which is good. I'm going to let it all dwindle down to like 1 or 2 projects, and then go like, okay, let's reset. Let's see what I want to do next.
I like that. You got to have a reset every now and then.
Yeah.
And you got a family as well, so yeah, you can kind of just reset whenever you like and think.
Yeah, and I think I was talking about this with Dan Waters, when I said we were discussing writers and creators who've been in comics for a really long time, and people who've been relevant in comics for a really long time. And I kind of agree. I think we both agreed on the idea that if you're a writer in any medium, you have to kind of reinvent yourself every 8 to 10 years. You have to reframe your point of view of the world, because the world has changed. You can't keep writing stories about a world that doesn't exist anymore, you know?
Mm.
And it is just going to keep going. But yeah, you keep doing what you're doing. You're absolutely smashing it. And I don't think you're going to be stopping anytime soon.
Well, hopefully not. Yeah.
So from Graffiti's Walls, These Savage Shores. Now, this was the first one that kind of put Ramby on the map for me in a personal way, because I kind of love vampires. I love like all the history and stuff. So this kind of tied it all together, and this really gripped me into your way of writing, Ram. So this for me was fantastic. Like, you've got vampires, you've got the stories of like the seas and the boats and stuff. This, where did this even come from?
Again, that kind of mess of a pool of ideas. I've been doing some research into vampire mythology, but nonfiction, mostly like factual research about where the ideas came from. And I found a date of the first mention of some of these like vampire myths in known history. And this passing thought came to my head where I said, well, I know about Rakshasas in Hindu mythology, and they're odd commonalities in that they always dwell in dark places and forests. They come out at night, they pounce on unsuspecting strangers and drink their blood. So it's very classical vampire, but a completely different mythology, completely different part of the world. So I did some research and actually found that Rakshasas were mentioned as blood drinkers 200 years before the first vampire was ever mentioned in any literature. And so that kind of set this weird idea of like vampires versus Rakshas in my head. And then I was watching this TV show called Taboo with Tom Hardy in it.
Taboo's quality. It's where my haircut came from.
Oh yeah, is it? And yeah, and the kind of, and then those two things were like years apart. And then having done both those things, it's a good show, but I got really annoyed by the idea that he went away somewhere in Africa to this mysterious exotic place and came back with powers, which is always how that sort of otherworld exoticism is treated. And I said, well, I want to do a story about he went away to these mysterious places in Africa and they laughed at him for being who he was. You know, it's just a weird idea that popped in my head. And all of a sudden everything clicked and I went, oh yeah, I could totally talk about colonialism if I did a story of this kind of European guy coming over to India and discovering that things are not all as they seem. And then, you know, one thing led to the other, as they do in stories.
So cool.
I mean, because this takes place in like the 1700s, so like the history is there, and I think throughout some of the stories that you kind of write, history plays like a predominant part in it, and like going back and stuff like that. So the 1700s with the vampire mythology and stuff like that, and superhero powers, it ties in so well to like the artwork that like the artist that you're working with on it. It just works really well. Do you kind of set the story and think, I want to work with this artist, or do you already have in mind the artist that's going to write the story for you?
No, I mean, I think they both happen kind of simultaneously in that I like to know who the artist is going to be before I start writing the story when it's still in my head. Usually when it's in my head, I have a visual sort of idea in mind in terms of what I want the aesthetic to be. Nothing specific, but I knew I wanted this kind of old European bande dessinée kind of aesthetic, but I wanted it to be very Indian. But I wanted it to, if you notice, a lot of things in the book are like that, like the epistolary form of letter writing in the book. clearly takes from Stoker's Dracula, which is a very European form. Again, the 9-panel grid, very classic American British comics staple. And yet the subject matter, the way the story is told, the way it's treated, it is very Indian storytelling, if you will. So I kind of knew that I wanted this aesthetic. And Sumit and I had been talking about working on something for a while, and I knew he'd be able to pull it off. I also think Sumit's great strength is in being able to transmit character through like a glance or a look or one little piece of body language. And that's very unusual, and it's very difficult to do as a visual artist, and he seems to do it kind of effortlessly. So yeah, no, it was absolutely my pleasure and good fortune to be able to work with Sumit on that book.
So while we're talking about superhero powers, Comics and Pops has said, Rambi, if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Super intelligence, yeah.
Super intelligence, I like it.
Yeah, that's all you need.
Yeah, to be fair, I guess, yeah, because you could do anything with your super intelligence.
Yeah. I mean, everyone has weaknesses, don't they?
Yeah.
I sound like such a villain saying that.
It was the laugh after that kind of topped it off.
Yeah, everyone's got weaknesses.
So we've got Chris Bell. It says, do you write multiple stories at once or complete each one before you move on? Or do you find yourself writing one thing that turns into something else?
I tend to conceptualize stories one at a time. But once I know exactly what I'm going to write, when it's going to be scripted, I can script multiple stories at once. I almost have to, given the nature of the industry and the nature of the work. So I don't know if that answers the question. I like to think about one thing at a time, but I don't have to write about one thing at a time, if that makes sense.
I got you.
And I think that ties into ABZ's comics, where being a process chemical engineer, are some of your ideas like ladder logic, where you have lots of various concepts that can go anywhere depending on and or the gates your story ends up going.
I'm glad you read that.
I'm not sure, Tom.
To an extent, I think that holds true in that I do tend to be quite organized with my plotting and planning and all of that. But it's this unusual thing. I think part of the reason why I like storytelling is because it's not like chemical engineering, in that the world's most logical person will write a very boring and uninteresting story. Is my hypothesis, in that if you can see the way a story works, it immediately becomes foreign. It becomes an object. It becomes a toy that you understand how it works. I think a story has to be a little bit like a magic trick. Yeah, there has to be a point where you forget that you're kind of in the crowd watching someone do something, and your brain just goes, oh, "How do you do that?" I think if you don't have that moment, even as a creator, when you're writing a story, then you're not trying hard enough. So to an extent, yes, maybe around 75-80% of the way, and then the rest of it is kind of me leaping off a cliff, hoping that there's water beneath.
Just a leap of faith. So we've had
pool of ideas.
It is into the pool of ideas. That's it. So we've had graffiti, we've had vampires, and then we move on to musicians.
Yeah.
Is there no end to your talents? Is there nothing you don't know about, Ram?
Do you have to do a lot of like backstory research on stuff, Ram, or like do you just kind of like whatever's kind of tickling your fancy at the time, whatever you're kind of interested in, do you write about that?
No, I think it's a combination of being a curious person by nature with an obsessive personality. So I'm curious about, for instance, recently I became curious about a company called Spin Launch that uses a rotating blade to accelerate a small rocket to a point where it's almost ready to hit escape velocity, and they throw it out into space, literally throwing a rocket into space, not using rocket fuel to do it, so saving lots of fuel. I became obsessed with this. I was like, how come no one's thought of this before? And just spent 2.5, 3 hours that I should probably spend writing, just doing research behind the physics behind throwing something into space.
I like it.
Just weird stuff like that. I keep doing that over and over. I do it with music. I do it with history. I do it with mythology. And I think on some level, it's because I do that there is that weird pool of ideas that exists without any organization. It's just because I don't look into things with the motivation of writing stories. I look into things because that is my nature. And eventually stories will crop up because I've looked at enough interesting things.
Yeah, that's cool. I like it.
Yeah, this is really interesting. Obviously, the thought process behind this is like he's a struggling musician, isn't he? And he returns for his mum's funeral.
Yeah, he's an underachieving musician who returns for his mom's funeral and discovers a photograph of a jazz musician in her possessions. And this is a guy who's never been quite successful at playing, so has made it his life's mission to know everything about everyone who ever played. So he can catch a little bit of the afterglow of being a performer, if you will. And because he's done that, it's now bothering him that he doesn't know who this is. And clearly his mother thought it was important enough to hold on to a picture of him. And as he starts investigating that person's past and history, he kind of starts delving deeper into his own reasons for why he is not successful, or why he is immensely talented but doesn't seem to have done anything with it. And whether it is the grief of losing his mother or his difficult relationship with her, he starts kind of slipping into this destructive spiral where he's losing his grip on reality, if you will. And those two stories of the man in the photograph and his own kind of intertwine and intersect in interesting points, always through jazz. So
that it does sound great. I mean, do you, as the concept of obviously music and graffiti and stuff, was there one aspect of it, did you enjoy doing one more than you have done so far?
Do you mean, do I enjoy writing one book more than the other?
Yeah, so obviously, so this one's like focused on like the music and stuff of the main character and stuff. Are you interested in doing, was this more interesting to do than it was for Graffiti's Wall, for instance? Or
no, I mean, not particularly. I think whatever story I'm writing at that point is the one that I'm most interested in at that point. And then once it's finished, I lose almost all interest in the book. As somebody else was talking to me about this, I say, like, are you really excited? Like, do you get really excited on release day when your book's coming out? Like, mate, like release day is like 3 months after I've finished working on the book, and I'm probably working on like 3 other things after that. Like, release day is for other people to get excited about. Release day is when I hit the send button from my desk and it's all gone. There's a PDF that has gone out to a printer, and then I'm done.
yeah.
Genuinely, with this one, it was a little bit weird in that we'd worked on it for so long, and this one took quite a lot of effort to get done, simply because Anand and I were constantly going back and forth on story and art. So by the time it was done, Aditya, who's the letterer on the book, came to me and said, "Hey, I just read the book yesterday, and I thought it read really well. I'm really happy with it. What did you think?" I was like, "I haven't seen it. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to open up the book and read another page of it for at least 3 months before I'm ready to look at it again." So, yeah.
And how long did it take for this one to be finished?
A year and a half, I think.
Year and a half. That's pretty good going, to be fair. I mean, on a standard, how long would it take you to kind of write? Like, for instance,
yeah, I mean, I don't think it's the length. I think it's just the amount of sort of intense brain power that you're putting into each of these books. Like, I could write a script, hand it off to the artist, and be like, "Your job now, do whatever you want, and it works. But that's not how Anand and I collaborate. Like I'll write a script, he'll send a layout, we'll go over the layout, we'll change things, we'll talk about why we want to change things, what we want to do with the story. And then that step happens with the colors, that step happens with the letterer. Some of those pages, like I've added colors to them. So yeah, it becomes this kind of intense jam session with a bunch of other musicians, if you will. And that is a lot more draining than writing a script and emailing it off to someone, you know.
And it must be good if you've got that partnership with someone and you've worked with them before, because you've done quite a lot with Anand. It must just be flawless now. You kind of both know what you expect, and it must be more of a streamlined process.
That makes it boring. So you have to do something unexpected. You see what I mean? Like, I think it's the same way it works in a band. The reason like really good bands keep evolving, keep changing their sound is because you did the last album. You don't want to just remake the last album again, you know?
Yeah. No, it is very much true. And then we've got a question from Mark Olrod now, talking about like character development and stuff like that. It says, does working on mainstream characters such as Venom constrain your creativity? Do you have a set of rules that you now write by?
I wish I had a set of rules that I got beforehand that I go like, okay, I have to work within this, because I don't mind constraints. I think constraints are interesting. They're creative challenges, right?
Yeah.
So someone tells me, for instance, with Justice League Dark, someone tells me, hey, we want you to do stories in 10 pages. But it's going to be really challenging. And I'm like, yeah, bring it on. I'll do more in 10 pages than you can manage in 20. That's interesting to me. And so I do like writing by those rules, if you will. The challenging thing sometimes is you write something with an assumption in mind, and then 2 weeks before it's going to go to print, actually we can't use this character. So that kind of stuff is frustrating sometimes, but it's part and parcel of large publishing houses and universes with 60 different people doing 60 different things that all have to tie in together. So
a nightmare to juggle.
It must be.
I mean, it's not. Obviously, there are parts of that feel like I would have, if it were purely me writing a book with that character, I might have done things differently. But part of the job, and you have to maintain a certain level of distance and professionalism, because I'm not writing something I thought of from scratch. I am absolutely writing something someone else owns, and they have expectations that ride with that as well.
Yeah. And then that ties into another question from the chat, and it's this is one of two. Leon Russell's got one of two. Presumably, it takes different muscles to write for pre-existing properties like Venom than for your own independent creations like Layla Starr.
Not the writing in itself. I think you do different things when you want to do those things. Like it depends very much on your motivation as a writer. When I'm writing a story, like I've met writers who are like, I was going to write, XYZ character, and then it didn't happen. And so I just turned it into create our own story. And like, I can never wrap my head around that, because I go like, if I'm going to write a story with XYZ character, it's going to take into consideration the entire history of that character. Like, that's why I enjoy it. I'm not going to write a story that could just slot in anywhere. It has to be part of the tapestry of that character, if you will. And so I think that muscle gets exercised a lot. How do I bring in some obscure reference to a thing that once happened in the 80s that is now going to become the defining thing of my run? So stuff like that is interesting as a story writing problem, if you will, to solve. Whereas with creator owned, you don't have to think about any of that stuff. And so with creator owned, my focus just becomes, I have this kind of need to get across some personal emotive thought or concept. And so I tend to push my creator owned stuff a little bit more into the abstract, into taking risks, if you will.
And then that kind of answers Leon's second question. Do you feel freer writing your independent work or counterintuitive? Do you feel freer writing within a framework? And he loves Radio Apocalypse, by the way, as we all did.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
No, I feel pretty free writing in both mediums, both formats, if you will. Like I said, I think I enjoy different things about doing those two different kinds of work. And so, for instance, there's no amount of creator-owned writing that will give me the joy of writing a metafictional issue of Justice League Dark where John Constantine is walking on the script pages, if you will.
Yeah.
Because doing that to me is also about going like, oh, okay, well, here's me adding to the metafictional weirdness that someone like a Grant Morrison brought in, or here's me kind of riffing off of something Neil Gaiman did in this one issue of Hellblazer, you know? So, yeah, I enjoy different things about it. So it's not a question of freedom or excitement one way or the other.
Now, you touched on Justice League Dark. For me, you changed Catwoman with this, like with Valley of the Shadow of Death. Like this was, I wasn't a massive Catwoman fan. I'd always kind of read her, and I think I speak for people in the chat as well. I don't really think she's ever been given a good chance to show who she actually really is. But when you came onto Valley of the Shadow of Death, was it something new for you to do, featuring Catwoman?
The Catwoman happened very, very interestingly. When I was originally brought onto Catwoman, it was to write a limited set of issues because I think there was a big kind of reset planned, and then that reset kept getting pushed, and so we were always kind of for a while in this place like 2 more issues. Okay, let's do 1 more arc. And then we got to a point where we were like, okay, this book is doing kind of well. Let's just keep it going. And it kind of fell into becoming as long a run as it was. Obviously, by the time I got around to finishing up that arc, it so happened that, you know, we'd had a baby as well. So it felt like the right time for me to go, okay, you know, I should quit while I'm on top of this. I don't want to be kicked out of Catwoman. So that seemed to be a good choice to make. But yeah, I'm quite proud of someone recently said to me that Father Valley was the most interesting villain they had seen created in like the Batman mythos in the past few years. And I enjoy creating my bad guys. So
but it's a really, really good, like now it's a trade paperback. It's a really, really good story. It really does go in depth, and as you said, the characters you created, it must be interesting and exciting to create characters like that and get that feedback.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to hang characters on eccentricities. I think, you know, a villain's not cool because of what he wears, the way he dresses, or they have to be weird in some way. And yeah. It's just like all the heroes are a bit weird in some way. I mean, blue spandex, red cape, come on, right? So it's all a little bit off kilter, and so I quite enjoy that about my characters. And that, okay, what can I take that is completely whacked out, off kilter? Like if anyone did this in real life, you'd look at them and go like, man, you need to be in an institution. But in comics,
it works.
It works, and I think that's great. And so, yeah, all the villains I've created tend to be in that space, if you will. I really enjoy it, and the aesthetic for Father Valley is this kind of creepy, long-haired dude whose eyes you can't quite see, and he keeps quoting the Bible at you. I love that shit.
I just found that freaky as anything, and it's one of them visions that you think as you fall asleep at night, you just see it and you're like, oh, right, I need to. So thanks for that, Ram. Yeah, that's a great one to stay awake to. So I haven't, for some God known reason, didn't include a slide for Swamp Thing. So let's just talk about Swamp Thing. So obviously, for me, it kind of how did that go? Did you pitch it as a new character inhabiting Swamp Thing? Because it's very much like the old Vertigo Swamp Thing, in my opinion. How did you? I mean, this was meant to be 10 issues, and it's now like on 16 or 17.
No, actually, it was always meant to be multiple seasons. So we'd pitched a season 1, and we'd said, "Hey, if it does well, we'll do a season 2."
Yeah.
And that's kind of exactly how it went. So kind of glad that it went to plan, to be honest. As far as the pitch, yeah, I absolutely pitched it with a new character taking on the mantle. How that came about is interesting because the whole 5G stuff was happening, and my editors at the time, they came to me and they said, "Look, here's a list of characters that are all up for grabs. Like, let's talk about ideas for any of these. Which ones would you like to pitch?" And somewhere on the list was Swamp Thing. I was like, I can't believe Swamp Thing is up for grabs. I am absolutely pitching a Swamp Thing book. And very early on, I think there were reservations at DC because it is a book that comes with so much history, right? It's Alan Moore, seminal run, the run that no one ever stops talking about in comics. And I remember very early on having a conversation with my editor and saying, like, no, it's because, I mean, the reason that is such a weight to carry is because people keep trying to recreate the success of the Alan Moore run, whereas I want to evolve the character based on the success of the Alan Moore run, and that I want to take everything he did and I want to recontextualize it, push it to a place where new person from India, no longer concerned about nuclear proliferation, but more concerned about the state of the climate, not concerned about the disappearance of small town America, but concerned about the sort of devouring of entire countries by capitalism. So I think part of the reason it gets compared so much to Alan Moore's work is because it absolutely tries to take on the philosophical leanings that his work did. But I don't think my writing is anything like Alan Moore's. And again, the reason it gets compared to Vertigo is because I think it's trying to do more than two things at once. The moment you start doing that, the story becomes super complex. It becomes interesting. It has layers. It has metaphor. It has intelligence. And suddenly everyone starts saying, "Oh, this is a Vertigo book." No, it's just a good story. All good stories do that. Yeah.
No, it is. It was. It's great, and it must be exciting for you to see like the positivity from the readers that want you to keep doing it, and especially going from DC as well. They can't think, "Yes, we want another volume. Keep doing it."
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if they mind me saying this, but very early on, I told you there was that sort of trepidation about a Swamp Thing book. They're like, the numbers aren't usually that great. They haven't been since back in the day. And then when we got in numbers for issue 1, it was just stunning. I think we came in over twice what DC had expected us to come in terms of numbers. And that was the first time I had a sense of like, people will actually get behind stuff if it is good.
Yeah.
There's this kind of overwhelming narrative of negativity about the industry sometimes, where people are like, "Oh, nothing's good anymore," and no one actually wants to read comics anymore. No, look at this book. It was expected to come in at X. It came in at 2.5X.
Yeah.
People will buy things that they are excited by, and so I think it behooves creators and publishers to look at that and go, "Oh, let's try new things. Let's try interesting things."
And that was, and it's still going strong, and it's interesting. I think you said volume 2 is now coming out.
We're going to be putting out issue 11 in March. Season 2 goes on until issue 16. As of now, the plans are to wrap by issue 16 because I think 16 issues is a nice chunky collection for a story.
Yeah, definitely.
But you never know. We'll see how things go by the time we get there.
So then we've touched base on DC. We've done Vertigo and everything.
Yeah.
This, for me, The Many Deaths of Layla Starr by Boom Studios, Ram, this was one of the most poignant comics run came out of 2021. I think this was, we followed every single issue on the show last year, and we even did like a roundup of all the comics that we featured last year, and this got like the Killer Comic Golden Star Award.
Twice.
Twice. It did get it twice, yes. This story was sensational. Like, if I had a hat, I'd be taking it off to you, because this was incredible. Like, from start to finish, where you've even got the issue that is told through the eyes of a cigarette. It's amazing. Because obviously this is the fine line between life and death. And where did this come from?
This came from a conversation at the bar behind San Diego.
That's where all the best ones start. It comes from a conversation at the bar. I love it.
Yeah, at the bar behind San Diego Comic Con, where Eric Harburn and I were sat at the bar. Eric Harburn's the editor at Boom.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, hey, I want you to do something like Graffiti's Wall at Boom, but I want the fantastical element to it. And so I was like, there's this weird tradition in India about telling stories about the god of death come down to live amongst the mortals. It's been a long tradition. It's always Yama, who is technically the god of justice or righteousness and not death, but he's always portrayed as the god of death because he's the god of judgment, if you will, and he comes down to earth and lives amongst its mortals. So I took that, but I also knew that there were so many comics written about death, you know, Gaiman's death and Day Tripper. And so I worried I was going to do something derivative. And so for the longest time, I was just like, what's my take? What's my angle? And I realized that that is not a universal truth in the way that we think it is, in that it is a cultural artifact. How we perceive death is a matter of where we come from and what traditions we come from and what culture it is, this kind of, either you take it as a very somber moment where you grieve for the people lost, or you take it as this moment where you drink and get silly and party and laugh and celebrate the life of the person who's gone, or is this massively religious thing that means you're communing with something that is bigger and beyond just one lifetime, if you will. And I think each of those deaths is a different person, is a different character. And I kind of wanted to base Layla Starr on the Indian idea of death, which I find to be very useful and very beautiful. In that the idea is that you're not really gone. You're just waiting to come back around again, because there's this idea of reincarnation in India. But I kind of take that on a metaphorical level, in that you are reborn each time someone remembers you. And then that kind of infuses itself into the book, where Layla Starr dies and is reborn because the god of life has a crush on her and keeps remembering her, keeps bringing her back, if you will. And through her impermanence, she understands what it is like to deal with the permanence of death for human beings who don't have these powers and who don't have this kind of magical ability to come back. So I suppose she truly understands death only after she has been removed as the god of death, if you will. Yeah.
I mean, it must have been exciting, because the trade paperback sold out a diamond.
Yeah, almost on day of release, like 1 or 2 days in, it sold out, and I believe it's gone for a second printing. And
I've managed to get a first print, so I'm happy at that. I managed to get Andy one as well, but it's everywhere. You can't get it nowhere. So the feedback from that must be exciting to see stuff like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? The single issues, people were still discovering this book when the single issues were coming out. It wasn't like, and now Ram V presents this issue 1 that's going to do these crazy numbers. No, it was a quiet book that came out. And that has kind of been my endeavor. I don't remember, but I think it was in a Neil Gaiman conversation where it said like, how did you manage to write Sandman? Like, how did you pitch this? And he said like, oh, I wanted to write something that people would pick up 10 years later. And maybe not as much of a success, but at least in a microcosm, it shows that the fact that the collection just disappeared off shelves like 2 days after it released is a sign again of people like, I didn't do any hyping or PR or marketing for this, Boom took care of all of that, but good stories sell and people pick them up, and they will continue to pick them up in whatever format that they choose. And I find that more than anything else, well, more than any kind of personal adulation, like, oh yeah, people dig my work. No, I just find that intensely affirming that, yeah, just put your head down and write a good story, and people will pick it up.
And
Definitely. Oh, he's got on mute. You're on mute, Charles.
Sorry. As you mentioned, this went under the radar. Like, let's be honest, there was no massive press about it. It was like, it's Boom Studios, but the story sold itself. Like, the story told itself. It's done what it's meant to do, and it is an incredible read. And for anyone that's in the chat who hasn't picked this up yet, when you can and do manage to pick it up, give it a read, because it's not what you expect. It's really not. It's such a great, in-depth, poignant, thought-provoking read. So, Ram, thanks for bringing that out.
No, my pleasure. I just wrote a story that was fun for me to write.
And it was great. And you mentioned Neil Gaiman, sorry. And Marcus said, do you plan to write a novel at any stage? Very few writers successfully cross between comic writing and novel writing, Neil Gaiman being the exception.
Yeah, I actually started off writing prose, and I only came into comics off of the success of some of my short stories. So it is a thing that I intend to go back to. Like I said, gotta let this all dwindle down to one or two things, and then think again about how I'm gonna section my time doing different things as well. So yeah, I do want to take on prose at some point. I did write a novel as part of my creative writing course that got picked up for awards and stuff, but it never came out, never got published. It got picked up by agents. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question. Like, my intention has never been to be a comic book writer. It has always been to just be a writer. And so I will, hopefully by the time this is all done, I will have written in as many mediums as I can possibly write.
That's cool.
And talking about like different mediums and going from Layla Starr, Venom. Like, this, when you was on the show last year, this was kind of at the forefront. This was the big news at that time.
Right.
How is this working out? Because you're partnering with Al Ewing, and it's kind of, there was some confusion about what part is Ram writing, what part is Al Ewing writing.
How does it matter? Just read the story. That's
the thing, exactly. And it was
just read the story. Can we get that on a t-shirt?
But how did this come about? Off of the success of obviously the Donny Cates run,
yeah.
Jumping onto this the way you've taken it is amazing, and it honestly is crazy.
Two crazy people trying to fit all their ideas into 22 pages each time.
It's mad.
It is a mad comic, and I love it for that reason. I also think there's something quite unique about Venom being the symbiote, being the common thread between two characters who are obviously connected, father and son, but their stories are happening literally universes away from each other, and yet they are intensely connected through the symbiote. I find that just structurally, I find that to be such a cool thing to work with. And people don't realize this. People still think that, oh yeah, we're going to get story A and we're going to get story B. And then I think recently issue 5 came along. They went, wait. Reading this issue of story B has now completely changed what I thought about the previous 4 issues of story A that came out. And that's going to keep happening in more and more intense ways. So watch out.
So exciting.
It has, and I think obviously Venom has gone through different reincarnations, and now we've got the Ram VNL Ewing incarnation. It's a crazy comic. I don't think you can say it any more than that. Like straight off, like page one, you're kind of thrown into this outer space Venom, and it's
time
just
traveling
exactly
Spider-Man like alien creatures that
exactly
nobody's quite sure exactly what they are or what they can do. And kind of that's kind of the thing that I wanted to lean into is, you thought it was essentially a black Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
And then you thought, no, well, hold on, it's an alien. And then you went, no, well, hold on, it's an alien that has a god who has dragons that have been here since the time of Beowulf. It's like, well, hold on a second. And the only commonality is no one has any clue what these things are or what they're capable of. And so if you take that as the premise for the idea, then of course it's a crazy comic. Yeah.
So how did you and Al sit down to discuss basically everything you've just said?
Pretty much bi-weekly Zoom calls, or I message him on Slack in a panic and go like, I need to do this in issue 8 and I didn't discuss this with you. It's kind of cool. It's like people throwing ideas back and forth at each other, and you're all trying to do interesting things, juggling those ideas before you toss it back to the other person.
I would love to be a fly on the wall seeing how this was conceptuated. It must just be so intense but so crazy at the same time to think, right, we've got Venom, we've got this character, let's just go hell for leather and throw shit against the wall and see what sticks.
I also think there's an element of making things work.
Mm-hmm.
I think the job of the writer is, by the time you're reading it, it looks like, oh my God, how did they plan this? Newsflash, like, we didn't. You do enough right things, you end up kind of in the right place at the right time. If you're a good instinctive storyteller, you arrive at this place where suddenly you're like, oh wait, if I now make this connection, it becomes this beautiful complex thing that looks like I intended it to be this way all along. And I think that is part of that joy of that I was talking about earlier, where if you do it enough number of times and you have some measure of talent, when you're diving off the cliff that, okay, I can hear the water. I'll be fine.
I'm safe this time. Now this comic, especially, I think when issue 1 first came out, there was like 30 odd store exclusive variant covers for this. Yeah. Roger's got an interesting question. It's like, just thinking, do you as a writer benefit from the store exclusive covers? Obviously it's the same story, but do you kind of benefit from the various other covers that come out?
Sometimes, not quite in the way that is immediately apparent, but like the writers benefit from the sales of any book. There's always royalties involved, depending on how much a book sells, and how much a book sells is clearly dictated also by how much every individual cover sells. And so if you have variants and you have people who are collecting the variants, or you have people who have particularly want a difficult to get variant, those things all have differing sort of impact on the success of a book. But overall, like, it makes no difference to me which variant people are buying. The only end result is that, oh, the book sold so much. And that's important. Like, I think it is a business and an industry at the end of the day, and so those numbers are important.
Now this comic had sold out when we went to Thought Bubble. So when
sold out twice, I believe it went to third printing. And
it did sell out on the way to Thought Bubble, Charlie, but half the people didn't get their orders.
Yes, they didn't. But I was lucky enough. We managed to pick up one in Leeds before we came to Thought Bubble, and thankfully you signed it, gave a nice little remark for that. So I've got a very decent Venom.
And also, like, I didn't know this, but like a couple of months later, I think it was Tom Taylor who pointed it out to me. But it was the highest selling comic of November, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
I've never had that before. So
It's crazy, mate. It went absolutely bonkers for this book. People went absolutely mad for it.
yeah, and like it continues to sustain quite
Mhm.
big numbers even to this point. I think issue 5 also sold. I think all of the issues that have been out so far have sold out and gone to second printings. So I believe issue 5 is also going to a second printing. Don't quote me on that.
Why not? Why wouldn't it?
I don't know yet. I don't know for sure, but I know the first 4 definitely went for a second printing.
Instagram quote, Ram said.
Dun, dun, dun. I have had that done to me.
No
They'll go
way.
like, "Hey, is this the first appearance of this character?" I'm like, "Yeah, I guess so." And then 2 days later, there's like walls of like writing on the internet going like, "Writer confirms this is the like." It was a random tweet you sent me. What is happening?
So we've got a crazy Venom story that's doing everything enjoyable, and then we come on to Radio Apocalypse from Walt. Now this really grabbed me because I think on the first page you turn it over and it says, whatever you do, if you read this comic, do one thing and play the music that they're listening to. I read the comic and then I did it with that music playing. All the senses are heightened and it totally involves you in the story more than it did when you first read it. How hard was it? This is a question from Cali Comics, and it ties in very well. It says, how hard was it to get the companies on board to add copyrighted songs to this story in particular?
So none of the songs are actually in the book.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that's in the book are song titles.
Yeah.
And so there's no copyright on song titles. So if anything, the book is telling you to go find your legally owned version of that song and play it for yourself. So it's not really using another art form within itself. It is reaching out to and connecting to another art form, which I find to be immensely fascinating. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. The reason I did Radio Apocalypse, because in my brain, there was no reason one art form shouldn't play with and interact with another art form. But we don't see it done enough. Whereas we should. Like, everyone has access to headphones, and most of the people on the train have their headphones on. They're looking at Kindles while they're going through. Like, why does no one put these two things together? And so Radio Apocalypse was born. So yeah, it wasn't a challenge at all in that we're not using any, like, not even the lyrics are in the comic, which I think is the beautiful bit, in that I don't want to reproduce the song. I want you to listen to the song as context for the story.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite first issues that we read for the show. Like when the lads like suggested it, I was like, "Oh, this sounds cool," and then we read it, and I was like, "This is amazing. This is definitely going to be one of them sleeper comics where people have slept on it, not read it, and then they're going to go back and kick themselves for not reading it for sure."
Yeah, I mean, I seem to be making a habit of doing that, but I'm just not one of those like hype guys who are like, "Oh yeah, I've got this thing coming out." No, like I'm definitely, if you build it, they will come kind of creator. So
yeah,
but the anticipation was especially after reading this, I just wanted to read more. And the fact is, this came out in November. Issue 1 came out in November.
Yeah, the whole
issue 2 only came out last week.
Yeah, the whole thing is kind of gone through a difficult production process, partly because of COVID, and Anand back in India had to deal with a lot of that. His family members having COVID. He got it a couple of times, so it's been rough, kind of making this book through all the health issues and concerns and all that. But we're also the kind of creators who don't. I don't want to make a book that is 75% of what it should be and put it out. So I'd rather take my time and put it out, and I suppose apologize for the tardiness. I'd rather apologize for the tardiness than apologize for not making it good.
No, but that's great because it keeps the readers on their toes. It's like, well, hold on, I'm going to read this. And what I did, I read issue number 1 and then read issue number 2 as well together.
Yeah, the whole thing works like a playlist too, because the original pitch and the original idea came to me one random afternoon. I was like, if the world were to end 2 days from now, and I could only have an audio cassette, what songs would be on that cassette? And lo and behold, Radio Apocalypse playlist came up.
That's amazing. I love it.
I can't wait to see the tunes that actually come from this play. Is it 6 issues? This is 6 issues, correct?
No, it's 4 issues.
4.
I mean, it is also a story that could go on and on, but that's a different conversation. At least this first installation is meant to be 4 issues.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all oversized issues as well. They're all like 32 pages long. So
No, they're great. I managed to get the foil one of these, and it's amazing. And the House of Nerd show has said Radio Apocalypse early contender for Book of the Year. Love the marriage of the story, art, and song in a title. I think it just ties everything together, and it's weird that no one's ever done that before.
Yeah.
Now you think of it, it's kind of like.
I tend to have this experience. A lot of people have had this with me, where I've come in and I've even pitched ideas to publishers sometimes. Mm-hmm. Like, you have character A who does this and character B who does this, and no one's thought of putting them together in this scenario, which is already built into the concept. Like, why not? And more often than not, the answer I get is just like, oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. No one's done this. Like, people kept going like, oh, it's brilliant. Vampirism is colonialism. Like, yes, it's so brilliant. It's been obvious. Like, of course this metaphor exists. Why has no one done it? And I suppose that's part of the creative drive, is you really want to make something that you wish was already out there.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's true. And we've got Andy, who's the third member of the Killer Comic Show. He's on daddy daycare duty, so myself and you, Ram, can totally appreciate that. He has said, on Radio Apocalypse Wild, I made a playlist for the many deaths of Layla Starr and have now started to do that for story arcs I enjoy, made in career, etc. I think you've set a trend. You started a trend, because I kind of I can't really read comics unless there's no noise around. But off the back of Radio Apocalypse, I kind of find myself chilling out more and reading comics that kind of fit the music that I'm trying to listen to.
Yeah, and it's weird, right? Like I can't listen to music when I'm writing. Obviously, words clashing with words.
Yeah,
but that's not true. If I play the kind of music that will inspire me to write the kind of thing that I want to write, then it works. Then it's not intrusive. So it's a matter of marrying what content your brain wants to engage with and the right kind of music for that. And that is super challenging. Like I saw an internet meme the other day where some guy's like, choosing my major for college, and he's got like a blindfold and a dart and a dartboard, and then choosing my morning playlist for the shower, and the dude's got like 16 screens and like 8 different playlists open, and he's like, so it's kind of a little bit like that, in that I tend to spend inordinate amounts of time choosing playlists for things to write to, and so it's not a stretch to imagine at all that there will be playlists for people who choose to read with that music on.
No, definitely, and I think it's quite clearly shown in Radio Apocalypse. So again, thanks for bringing that to the forefront. Yeah,
my pleasure. And next issue is going to be, we're working on it right now, but it's going to be an absolute trip. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Is that going to be 4 months' time, or is that kind of, are you keeping us on the edge of our seats with that one?
Hopefully not 4 months, but not too far off either. Yeah, no, that's not too far off the mark either. Yeah,
that's a quick quote. Put that in the paper. Ram says, "Creative says we won't have to wait 5 months."
But no, you was going to say like the next issue is a.
Yeah, no, I'm doing something that I haven't done before in anything I've written.
Wow.
And again, once I won't tell you what it is, but once you see what it is, you'll go like, of course this makes sense. Of course, it makes sense to do an issue like this as
Mhm.
part of this series with music playing in the background.
Okay, cool. Excited.
And he's got a good question here. He said, why is there no Radio Apocalypse radio cassette variant covers? They've missed a trick there.
Yeah, I mean, we probably could have had a lot of variant covers, but also just making this book has been such a challenge with like the pandemic and all of that. And so our focus has just been on like, let's make one thing with one cover and then think about everything else. so I mean, I'm sure Vault has a plan for variants as well, but you're absolutely right. If I had another year to make this, I'd probably have, audio cassette variant covers. Title on a poorly stuck white tape going across the spine of the vertical thing of the book.
Yes, definitely. That's 100%.
I was thankful enough. Andy managed to get me the variant cover of the tattooed model on the front cover.
Yeah,
and she's got everything. But I didn't know. I got that one, and then he also managed to get me this one.
Oh yeah, that's the phonogram.
And that one as well. So I managed to get 3 for the price of 1, which I was ecstatic about. But yeah, this was great. This was great. And then off the back of that, silver coin.
Yeah.
Now
I
I
really enjoyed this issue.
You can tell. You really can tell, Ram. You really dug deep into that cesspit of where you get your ideas from, because this is, I hadn't read any of the silver coin until Andy had picked issue number 5, I think it was. So for me to catch up, I had to read issues 1 to 5, and then I kind of got stuck into it. Issue 6, issue 7. This is horror greatness. This was awesome. Where did this whole Aztec casino thing come from?
Don't know. I think let's go back to
it starts with at a bar.
No, I think you have to go back to this like weird book I'd read about architects who specialized in designing casinos. Do you know this? Like, casinos are designed specifically to be evil things.
Yeah.
Like they don't let natural daylight in because your body learns to measure time that way. They don't have any visible clocks in there, so you can't really tell how much time has gone by. The exit signs are always designed to meld in with their backgrounds, because at least US law says that the exit should be clearly visible. So they are clearly visible, but then there will be like other green neon tubes around it so that you'll definitely miss it. It's weird stuff like that. Like they'll put slot machines as soon as you come in and slot machines right before you're about to leave, so that the gambling game with the least amount of odds in your favor is always accessible as soon as you come in and right before you leave. So it's just like evil stuff like that. And that took my brain to like the architectural design of evil things. And then for some reason I thought of like human sacrifice and Aztec temples.
Of course you did. Of course.
It's a natural fit, right? Human sacrifice, Las Vegas.
Well, you see, because when Cortez went through Mexico, and he was the first to write about the Aztec practices, he wrote of them as inherently evil. And they were like, this is terrible. They do this. They're evil. Whereas the Aztec mythology actually celebrates the sacrifice and is a remembrance of the gods sacrificing themselves. So I found there to be this kind of really dark twisting of the idea of remembrance and sacrifice in there, and just took that to sort of modern American need to win all the time, and that being epitomized by people who spend hours and hours in these casinos just trying to be a winner at last.
I've been to Vegas and it's exactly like that. Like you can't help but, I'll have one more. I'll put $5 in this, and then before you know it, you've been there 6 days. You've missed your flight home, and it's shit's gone to pot.
Also, they have slot machines in the airport. How evil can this place be? They literally have slot machines in every waiting area near the gate where the flight takes off from. That's just terrible. Stop
Yeah,
it.
yeah, it is. I guess the question is, and if you can't answer this, don't. Are you going to be doing any more silver coins?
Not particularly in the near future, at least, because I know, and I love working with Michael as well.
Mhm.
He's a brilliant artist. But I know that Michael's intent with this and his plan with this was like one artist and lots of different writers.
Yeah.
So, you know, I would. The reason I'm saying no is not because I don't want to do it, but more because like, no, that is a really cool plan, and you should work with, like, if you do 20 issues, you should work with 20 different writers. Yeah.
And it is great, and yeah, I think there's a scene in it, and the writing goes with it perfectly, where he literally just reaches into his soul and just pulls it out, and it's just, I just don't know where your head goes at sometimes, but it's amazing. It's great. Keep doing it.
This is like one of the only issues of Silver Coin that I read, and I really enjoyed this one. That's for sure.
But that's the good thing, because you can just jump on no matter where it is.
You can read anyone, and you know, they're all different. They all do different things for different people. So yeah, it's an exciting project to be part of.
So that was the Silver Coin, and now we're kind of coming into like the more recent stuff. Carnage.
Ooh,
now this was meant to come out
Speaking
yesterday.
of horror.
Yeah, speaking of horror, this was meant to come out yesterday, so we was going to kind of read it and talk in depth about it. It's now unfortunately been put back, I think, until next week or the week after.
Yeah.
You've got Venom under your belt. You've now got the other symbiote. This is so exciting. I'm very excited to read this. How was it?
I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be very different from Venom, very different from what people expect off a Carnage book. I don't think the editors had read a Carnage that acted and sounded like this.
Are we going to go to a very dark place, Ralph?
Sorry?
Are we about to go to a very dark place?
We're about to go to a very dark place in very hilarious ways.
Yes, I love it already.
This Carnage is evil, but he's evil because he likes to watch terrible things happen. Of course he's evil in that, he's gonna tear people apart and there's blood and gore, yada yada. All of that stuff is there. Yes, of course you expect that from a Carnage book. But this is also a Carnage who just enjoys kind of sitting down and go like, I set this little ball rolling. Let's see how many people it crushes.
That's amazing.
I want to read it more now. If that was the premise of it, that's so enjoyable. Was it fun? Is it fun being on this?
Yeah. I've written 3 issues, and I've already done more terrible things to people in those issues than I can count. So, and I mean, like,
you say that with a smile on your face as well.
Yeah. I'm not a big kind of, gore and horror guy, in that I do them in comics, but I don't necessarily go like, oh, that's very scary. Like, it does nothing for me. The scary stuff is what people are willing to do to themselves when they think they're pursuing something they want. So I guess that is more of the theme of my Carnage.
I'm so excited.
I so wish this had come out yesterday, because I so like to pick your brains on this. When it does come out, I will be bombarding you with messages on Instagram or Twitter, just finding out where this came from. So then we've got Carnage, but then I think one of the most highly anticipated books that has recently been revealed that you're now jumping onto is Aquaman, DC Black Label, Andromeda. Now this made back of my hairs on my neck stand up, because this is Aquaman in a way I don't think anyone has ever seen before.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the aim. I knew I wanted to do Aquaman, and the moment you think of Aquaman, you think of like this kind of fantasy, old kingdom, Atlantis, gods. And I wanted to move away from all of that and go like, okay, what can we do with this character that doesn't do any of those things, but is still quintessentially an Aquaman book? And we came up with this. I felt like there were very few horror books, in especially in comics, that tackled the ocean as a setting for really, really sort of unnerving psychological horror, if you will. And I've been fascinated with the ocean because I think there are a lot of commonalities between deep sea horror and cosmic horror. They're both spaces we don't understand. They're both places that are kind of psychologically metaphors for the depths of our own soul, if you will. And so using that in context of this and looking at Aquaman through that lens is super interesting. Yeah, when I'd written the outline, I knew that, oh my God, there's a complete story here, and it works. It just works. Yeah.
And it's DC Black Label as well, so we can only guess what to expect from that, and especially what you've just told us about Carnage. I can only imagine. And you're working with Christian Ward on this, aren't you?
Yeah, Christian. I have this weird story about how I met Christian. I had 3 Xerox copied pages of Black Mamba in me. That was all the comic book work I had done. And I walked into a convention in London, and Christian Ward was sat at a table talking to an aspiring artist for about 45 minutes about breaking into the industry, work, talent, all of that. And I was just stood there for like 45 minutes soaking in, like, what is this person saying? It's all very interesting. And then, 5 years later, like, I'm working with that person. It genuinely feels like, oh man, this is that moment where I look back and go, oh yeah, it's come full circle. Here's a person that I really admired, that I wanted to work with when I was just starting out. And now I'm working with that person, which is really cool. Yeah.
That's great. Connie Dalton has said the ocean is her biggest fear, so she might have to keep an eye out for this.
More people should fear the ocean. No, I mean, it's that weird thing. Like, I've traveled quite a bit as a chemical engineer, and I think there's a commonality to spaces like deserts and oceans, where there's in the desert in Qatar, I believe you could drive out to a point where the road, you can't see the road because sand blows across it, so you can't really see where the asphalt is, if you will. But the road exists, and it's a straight road through the desert. But you can get to a point where you can get off your car and look around, and you don't see one thing other than sand and sky. Not one thing, not a tree, not a cactus in sight. And you can't drive across that stretch of road without another person in the car, because if you're driving alone, you're liable to get lost. They will not let you drive alone on that stretch of road. Like, that to me is like, it induces tension, right? Even as I speak about. And I feel like I've had that sensation on a small boat out in the middle of the sea. Forget the ocean, just the sea, where you can take a boat out on a sea to a point where you look around and there's nothing other than water. And it's a very unnerving experience to be like, no, I don't belong here. What if I keep going in this direction and I never get back to a piece of land? And this story particularly takes place at a place called Point Nemo. I don't know if you guys know of this, but because when our satellites and spacecraft kind of fall out of orbit, they crash back onto Earth. And everyone always assumes that, oh yeah, those things burn up. No, they don't completely burn up. They burn up, but there's still like a huge chunk of it that comes and lands back on Earth. And the place, there's one point where they've been downing all these spacecraft since the beginning of the space race. And it's called Point Nemo. And it's the point in the ocean that is farthest distance from any inhabitable land. So it's potentially the safest place to crash land these things. But that just, like, in my head, I'm just thinking of the ocean floor is just riddled with these like dead bones of old spacecraft just sitting there. That is horror gold. Yeah.
And this comes out in June.
Yes, that comes out in June.
so there is a wait for it, and I think the hype is just gonna this. I mean, this is. I mean, look at Aquaman there. He doesn't exactly look happy, does he?
Charlie.
No, we wanted to treat Aquaman as a mythological figure. What if Aquaman was a myth that came alive? One of my earliest design notes to Christian was like, it should feel like, imagine a statue, a sort of Greco-Roman statue fell into the water and no one discovered it for hundreds of years. And then later on you dug it up. Imagine what that would look like. That's what I want Aquaman to feel like. A creature that of the sea, not a human being swimming in water, but a creature of the sea, if you will. And Christian took that and kind of, he wanted to do armor from his influences. I don't know if you can see it, but there's some influence from the armor that Gary Oldman wears in Coppola's Dracula. So yeah, just a mixture of influences, but I think it looks stunning.
It does. It looks great. And Andy said, after reading Layla Starr, he took a deep dive into the Indian gods, and Varuna, the god of water, oceans, and rain, would be a great character to bring into Aquaman.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much the Indian pantheon and the Norse gods and the sort of Greco-Roman pantheon, they're all the same. Like India is the equivalent of Poseidon. India is the equivalent of Zeus. Like they're all there. So but that's a story for another day. I've already had that idea, sir. But you will not see it because my Thor special with Marvel never came out. But if you had, you would have seen that idea.
And that's the end. We've done an hour and a half, Ram, and it's been absolutely amazing. I've got two questions. Yeah, we've done an hour and a half. I've got two questions that we've got people asking. Now, I've heard you on different interviews, and you've said, like Wakishi's Tea House has said, do you have a bucket list of characters you would love to write? You prefer to write stories instead of having a bucket list of characters.
Don't have a bucket list of characters. I tend to have stories that I want to write, and I tend to have characters that will meld and fit with those stories really well. So I know a lot of people do this, but they're like, oh, I really like this character, so I want to write them. No, I usually go like, oh, I really want to write the story. I wonder what weird character that I can pick up that no one's heard of for 10, 20 years that they will let me do this crazy thing with. So that tends to be my approach.
Nice.
And then Andy has put, Ram, your productivity is off the charts. What do you do to relax when not writing books or changing nappies?
My wife wishes I changed more nappies. Yeah. I tend to listen to music, tend to read. I tend to play music. I tend to play some video games now and then. And I tend to go walk to cafes and do some people watching and drink wine and just sit there for hours. Yeah.
The best life.
Yeah, that sounds like a perfect life. Where do I sign up?
So other than everything else that we've discussed tonight, is there anything else that you are working on that you can discuss, or is it very tight-lipped? And
Yeah, I mean, I've got a creator-owned project at Dark Horse that will come out soonish. We're close to halfway through the thing. So that's very exciting. I pitched it as a mecha kaiju comic.
Oh, I'm in already.
Sold.
But also ghost story, romance, sci-fi horror.
Okay, I was in, you just said mecha. I was like, I'm in.
So that's with artist Evan Cagle, and that one will be announced soon. And then I've got another creator-owned project with two creative teams in the same project, which is kind of interesting. Like we're doing a thing that, again, once it comes out, you'll go like, why hasn't anyone else done this? So I'll be working with Lawrence Campbell on art, and then Dan Waters and Sumit Kumar are working as another creative team, and once those books are announced, you'll see why. So that should also come out at some point later this year. And then I've got one more kind of big DC project that will be announced sometime soon.
If that isn't a way to end the show, then I don't know what is. Well, I do have two questions for you, and Andy's kind of touched on it as well. We spoke last year why you were still missing a print for your back wall. Now, have you decided what print you're going to put there? Because I remember mentioning it.
No, I mean, I've done more things since.
Yeah.
Problem is, I've done 3 new things since, and
so
so
4.
yeah, if I added 3, you would
5,
still
yeah.
have the same problem. So
Yeah.
I need to do one more before I can order a new set of tiles. And
So when we get you back on the show next year, or whenever we do, that will be complete with it.
yeah, hopefully.
And
also, there's so much more space.
Exactly. So you've got more to fill. Do you know if you'll be going Thought Bubble this year?
Yeah. I've been going to Thought Bubble pretty much every year since 2015. I haven't missed a single one. So I will be there. I will be there again this year. Yeah.
That would be great.
Awesome.
And we will be definitely catching up with you. And that's going to be great. But
it
honestly,
will be my pleasure.
It will be. It would be great. Honestly, we was meant to meet you at the bar last time, but I don't think it really happened.
Yeah, like the way my thought bubbles go, I'm like, yeah, I'll see you there. Never show up.
No.
Because something else happened. Someone else came down the road and they were like, hey, you should come here. I'm like, I guess, okay. So
why not?
Yeah. It's terrible making plans, but I will definitely see you at some point.
Definitely.
At the festival, yeah.
But Ram, it's been such a pleasure. Your second appearance on the show has been incredible. Thank you for everything you've done since 2016. And thank you so much for appearing on the show again.
Yeah, thanks,
Ram. My pleasure. Yeah, it's always great talking to you guys.
Thank you very much. Everyone in the chat, you've been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, thank you everyone for taking the time.
It's been good. You're very well liked, Ram. Like they love you, mate. It's you're clearly doing something, and I think that's only going to go.
It's good to be liked. I hope to tell many more stories and be worthy of such praise.
That might change with what you said about Carnage and Aquaman, but I don't think it will.
I'm sure there are people who will like that as well.
They're a sick bunch, so I don't think you've got any. But Ram, as I said, it's absolutely a pleasure. Guys in the chat, thank you very much. That's another Thursday well spent. Enjoy your weekend, and we will see you same time next week. See you later.
Thanks.